Absolutely. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for this webinar and broadcast this afternoon. I want to thank everyone. Just to quickly introduce myself, I am an alumna of the University of Denver and will be moderating our 4 great panelists today. And I am also currently in the middle of a hospitality pivot, so I find their expertise and insight very valuable myself. The intention of our time together today is to foster more hope and clarity and momentum for a better 2021 as we address all the challenges facing the hospitality industry. So to that end, it is my pleasure to introduce the outstanding group we have with us today, beginning with Dr. Corsun. Dr. Corsun is an invaluable advocate of social impact and has been instrumental in putting together this event with Compassionate Leaders Circle for us. Dr. Corsun is currently the director at the University of Denver's Fritz Knoebel School of Hospitality Management. He earned his PhD from Cornell at their School of Hospitality Administration. And prior to that, he was a successful restaurateur himself in New York. In addition to Dr. Corsun, we are also joined by our co-host, Laurel, and she is the CEO and founder of Compassionate Leaders Circle. Laurel has spent, I'm not sure if she wants me to say how long, but a couple decades as a career change expert with experience in coaching and consulting individuals as well as organizations from some amazing universities, including the University of Denver and Cornell, to large companies like Toyota, Disney, Viacom, and the New York City Board of Education. She is passionate about helping organizations provide lovable work and validating change models that help people find work that they love. In addition, we are joined by 2 other University of Denver alumni. Debbie Brown is an accomplished and passionate HR and hospitality leader. Debbie enjoyed a multidimensional career with the Four Seasons, and at the culmination of that was VP of HR for the Americas. She, in that role, was leader for 50 hotels, over 10,000 employees in the US, Canada, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Currently, she is working in a consulting role, and I will let her get into a little bit more on how that evolved and where she's at. And finally, we are joined by Richard Gonsmart, restaurateur and philanthropist based out of Florida. He is a 4th generation caretaker of the Columbia Restaurant Group. And Richard has been named more than 100 awards, including Community Hero by the Tampa Bay Lightning. So a lot that he's doing in his industry, in his realm, not just keeping the family restaurant business going. So again, I just want to thank all of our panelists for joining us. And David, I wondered if you would open us up and share a few words about today's panel.
Sure, I'm delighted to also welcome everybody. And I'm so thankful for the people who are on screen with me. They're friends and colleagues and invaluable in my life. This is obviously a really challenging time. Those of you who are on in the moments leading up to 1 o'clock may have heard us refer to the tragic events recently in Boulder. What we're experiencing societally is a huge challenge, and not just because of events like Boulder and Atlanta in the last week. COVID has presented very obvious challenges, and none more so than in terms of an industry that's been affected than hospitality. There are a lot of people who have pivoted as a result of what COVID has wrought through the forced restaurant closures by choice, hotels in the same situation. And I think a lot of people have had their sense of purpose and being, maybe, and identity, or the piece of identity that's so important, that is wrapped around what we do. Who we are is very much aligned with what we do. And that's been challenged for so many people of late. And so I was delighted when Laurel broached the subject of co-hosting this panel. with me. And I'm again delighted to welcome all of you, most especially the panelists. Thanks, Hannah.
Absolutely. And Laurel, I wondered if before we dive into some of the questions, if you'd be willing to give us just a synopsis of the pivot types and basic strategy related to them in your curriculum.
I would. It'd be a great honor. So let me share my screen. I'm going to just share a few slides. So I get to work with my dear friend, David Corsun. He and I went to undergrad together, so we've known each other for a long time. And it's one of my great honors to work with him. We do a program every fall for his seniors called Pivot with Purpose that we've adopted for younger people. But I'm going to share some of the work that we do with older adults today. And I think on any day, compassion and love is a good idea. And I get to partner with David and his team who embody love and creating lovable workplaces and leaders that are going to be compassionate in the workplace. So just to ground us in this idea of purpose, you can think of purpose as the fuel that's going to get you to your vision. So if you're the vehicle and the vision is the destination, the fuel can be purpose, can also be referred to as your deeper why, or the reason for which you do something. And we help our participants focus on positive reasons for doing something. And again, if things are built upon love, they are positive. If things are built upon hate or fear, the purpose is not so positive, as we experienced in Boulder this week. So why is purpose important? There's so many great things about purpose. And I always say the scholars have caught up with the sages. We always knew that purpose was important for thousands of years, but now there is actually evidence that supports community and building a sense of community at work. We also know that people with purpose are more likely to have raises and promotions. Mm-hmm. And personal purpose is linked to productivity and longevity. I got to interview the CEO of Vitamix last year, who helps her employees at Vitamix create personal purpose. She did that from instinct, and she just thought it was a great idea. And then she went back to school and got her PhD and proved that having a personal purpose is even more impactful on productivity than company purpose. So purpose has an ROI. I'm going to help you in a quick way. I know that a lot of you are pivoting. In truth, we used to have career transitions, and now we're always in career transition, especially when we're dealing with crisis. So we're going to do a quick exercise here. You might want to get some paper and pen out if you want. And as I go through these pivot types, I'd like you to choose which one sounds most like you. So we have 7 pivot types. The first one is learner, which is someone who needs a change, but they may not have a clear vision for what's next. And that's our default type. So if you're not sure where you fall, you default to learner. Then there's likers. You like your job, but you want to love it. Then there's leapers. A lot of us might be already in a transition. They want to change jobs, and or you're in a job search. And by the way, I'm going to share all these slides with you. So, but I appreciate Richard just took a picture. I feel honored. Lancers are people that want to grow a freelance career, start or grow. Launchers are people that are growing a division, a business, an organization that can be not-for-profit or for-profit. Leavers are focusing on their legacy, what they want to leave behind. So that might include succession, mentoring, retirement, volunteering, golf. Linkers, So if you have a vision and you can't decide what you are, then you're a linker because you're committed to more than one of these types. So just for fun, choose a type, and then I'll give you your strategy to focus on. So all these strategies are good for everyone in developing a career, but just to help you get on the road of focus for what's next. If you're a learner, the best thing you can do is identify and develop your passions. What really lights you up? If you're a liker, if you're someone who likes their job but you want to love it, you might think about developing your strengths in your current position and maybe taking on a passion project, a project that'll help you fall back in love with what you're doing. Maybe it's developing community like Richard does. Leapers are focusing on generating a long list of possibilities. I know from working with people in hospitality over the last year, those possibilities might include starting your own business or taking your beautiful business skills to another industry. So thinking about all the options that you have. Lancers, I always tell people you can start a freelance business with a business card and one client. You don't have to have a business plan. You just need one client. So think about your pitch. What's your pitch? What are you selling? What's your value? Focus on your LinkedIn bio. Launchers, it's always good to focus on identifying the best people to partner with. That might be your current staff. It might be your vendors. It might be investors. So think about the people that you want to partner with and go after them and develop those relationships. Leavers, you want to focus on your priorities. What's the most important way you want to spend your time? Is it with family? Is it developing creativity? Think about your priorities. And then lastly, linkers, those people that have more than one of these pivot types going, you want to think about a reasonable plan so you can attend to the types that you want to move forward with. So that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. I am going to share these slides with you. I'm also going to follow up with 2 ebooks. One ebook that we developed with our students at the University of Denver for younger adults, and then another ebook, and they're called Pause for Purpose for anyone who's out of school. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Laurel. I really appreciate that. And for all the attendees, we're going to jump into a couple questions. If you have any questions you would like to ask the panelists, please just throw them in the Q&A and we'll get to those. So I think everyone would be curious to know, and I would love to start by having each of our panelists just share a little bit more about yourself and your most impactful pivot to date and what that catalyst was for the change. Debbie, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Hannah. I think that the reason that I think David initially thought about putting me on the panel is that I was actively part of an advisory board at the University of Denver and called him one day and said I was leaving Four Seasons. And he said, well, why would you do that? And I think that leaving Four Seasons is probably the most significant pivot that I've had in my life. And the reason for that is that I really spent my entire career with Four Seasons. I absolutely loved what I did, loved who I worked for and with. And David's question of why would you think about leaving was a good one. But I wanted to be very intentional about when and how and why I left. I learned early in life that it's better to leave early than late, whether it's a cocktail party or a career. And so I really wanted to be very purposeful about this. And I realized, especially with the impact that everybody's had in the last year, that this was a gift, that I had the choice to decide when I wanted to leave. I realized that I wasn't young, but that I was young enough to be able to really have a very fulfilling next career chapter. But there was that window of time that I needed to be sure to take advantage of. I also realized that because it was so good, it was going to be very hard to leave. And I ended up hiring a coach that I worked with for many months to help me get excited about what was to come next and not sad about what I was leaving behind. Dr. Seuss says, be happy that it happened, not sad that it's over. And I needed to get into that mind space. I also wanted to let go of Four Seasons before I had left Four Seasons, because I knew that I couldn't really pick up the new until my head was clear. And I guess the last thing that I would say is that this pivot was obviously significant. It took me time and intentionality to get to the place that allowed me to make the decision. But when the time came, I had to stop getting ready and I had to do it. And I think some of us shortchange the front end and we rush to make a decision. But I think some of us take too long to make the decision. And so I think you have to give yourself time to pivot, to think about how and what your pivot style is and when and how you're going to do it. But then you've got to stop getting ready and you've got to do it. So that's my story.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I love what you shared about using a coach, even though you were at such a high point in your career. And I love what you shared about getting in the right mind space, because even a well thought out and, like you said, desirable pivot still comes with the chapter closing in order for a new chapter open. And that can be a tough transition.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Richard, would you like to share a little bit more about your story?
Sure. My education started at a young age of probably 3.5 years old. When I went into our kitchen and went into a cooler where the whole fish were, and they scared me. I ran out, and the chef laughed. And my grandfather, Casimiro Hernandez, the second generation, took me in, explained to me the importance of fresh seafood. And that every Friday when I would go with my mother, I should look into the eyes for the clarity. The gills should be bright, dark red and moist, and the flesh should be firm. And that was my job every Friday. The day that I couldn't tell if they were fresh because they cut the heads and filleted them out, I cried and they all laughed at me. But what it taught me was, and he said, you're only as good as your last meal. I started working in this business at the age of 12 years old and cooking. I wanted to wash dishes. I wanted to understand it. I wanted to learn all aspects and the challenge they went through. And so history tells us everything. And my dad told me history was the most important topic I would ever study. So I started researching the challenge we faced over the 116 years from the Spanish flu, where thousands and millions of people died, and how we survived, and came the Prohibition and Great Depression, and what my grandfather did by building the first air-conditioned dining room in the city of Tampa with a handshake borrowing $35,000, and the success that it had. And then urban renewal in the 50s and tore out all the homes and all the cigar factories closed, the challenge we faced. What I learned is every 25 years, we've had a major crisis. And in 1995 was the crisis I had to deal with. My dad had passed away, leaving a chief disaster officer who was supposed to be in charge of our money. And I had to learn to take over the company. I was not the president, I'm the youngest son. In Hispanic culture, usually it's the older brother. And I realized my integrity is the most important thing. And I talked to every vendor, every banker. It was a challenge that most said I would never survive, and I did. I'm a person of great faith. And for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been telling my daughter who works with me, my nephew, I said, I promise you, you will have a crisis will define who you are. And if you're prepared. Where when we hit this crisis, I was as well prepared as anybody in this industry. And I said I would be the last person standing, because I would never have happened to me what happened then. I was debt free. I was reinvesting. I was invested to my community that supported us. We had this challenge, and I was here to help my nephew and my daughter. Where we have 1,450 employees, and we provided the equivalent of 9,000 meals a week to the employees, staff, family. Because why? Because they had no way to have food. We paid their health insurance. We contributed to their 401k. We kept people employed as much as we could. So this was the 95 challenge. I prepared for this, and I had to make them understand. And they did. And they challenged me. But this family's been through crises over and over, and every 25 years. And we've made changes, and we've learned from this, and we did make some pivots that were instrumental and will prepare us for the future.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Richard. And I think it's interesting to hear, by comparison to Debbie's story, that some pivots come out of a need or a necessity, and that's the evolution versus more of a willful one. So I do think that's really interesting to have those two dynamics. David, why don't you go ahead and share?
You're muted.
You're muted.
Welcome to Zoom. Some of you know this, I know the panelists know, but this is my second career. My first was as a restaurateur. Actually, Hannah mentioned that. And I reached a point in my career in my early 30s when I was an owner operator at the time. And I hit a point where I felt like I came to the realization that the most important thing that I did in owning my own business, and I think this will resonate with Richard especially, because I know his purpose, is that I created a safe place for people to come to work where they could earn a living wage and where they could bring their whole selves and feel safe doing that. And creating that humane workplace was what made everything that we did for our customers possible. And it occurred to me that I could be more fulfilled and make a greater contribution if I began working with young people who would be managers, who would be leaders in the workplace, to help them understand, one, the importance of creating humane workplaces, and two, how to do it. And so that became my new purpose. And that necessitated me making a really discontinuous change and going back to school, which those who knew me as an undergrad were in shock about. But I had a checkered undergraduate career, but I was great in grad school because I was really hungry to learn. And now I get to live my purpose. Doing what I do now keeps me young. Being around students keeps me young, and doing the work that we're doing to model corporate social responsibility at Fritz Knoebel, to be socially responsible as an institution is really important, and to help students find who they are and what they're capable of. And that's really how Fritz Knoebel, I mean, the school is an extension of me in that regard, in that, you know, our brand platform is Unlocking Extraordinary. We're a boutique shop, and we have the opportunity to get to know our students well enough to reach inside of them when we see this potential, and to help them surface it and develop it so that they can live their purpose too.
Absolutely. And as an alumna, I am so proud to be a testament. Dr. Corsun was the director when I was there as well. And it's what you say is very true, both in your personal passion, but also in the University of Denver's cultivation. And I think our other two alumni are great testaments to that as well. So thank you for all you do, David.
Thanks.
Laurel, why don't you go ahead and share?
I am so proud of my friend David Corson, what he's created. And I think my biggest pivot is happening right now. I 2 years ago, because of a failed business partnership, I had to relaunch my company. And I think, again, sometimes pivots happen to you through pandemics or partnerships, and sometimes you choose them like Debbie did. But pivots chose me most of the time. So as a, I was pretty much a solopreneur. And 2 years ago, I launched a larger company with a larger team. And we went from being an education company to being a media and education company. So through really luck, I got to start writing about compassionate leadership at Forbes. And through the pandemic, I learned how to do a podcast. So I have 2 podcasts. And I am learning every day about my future and how to blend education with new media. And I think I told David, both of us really did not peak in undergrad, but we're peaking now. So it's never too late.
Wonderful. And I think Laurel is being slightly modest. She also had a previous career in hospitality, and she herself pivoted at feeling led into the calling of helping others through these exciting yet simultaneously demanding moments of change. So obviously she is the creator of Pivot with Purpose curriculum, and we couldn't have pulled this event off without you, Laurel. And we're honored that you're able to share your resources and excited that you're going through another pivot yet again. So the next question I want to pose to our panelists, sometimes, like in Richard's case, the timing or need to pivot can be obvious. Other times it can be more elusive. And I'm curious to hear from each of our panelists how to recognize when the right time to pivot is and what role purpose plays in that. David, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I think I'm going to rely to get started on something that's a piece of something I've written, a book chapter I've written around organizational change. And change only occurs. You can only bring people along through the introduction of change when they're dissatisfied with the status quo. Because if people are happy with what is, they have no reason to change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that recognizing in oneself, being in touch with one's emotions, recognizing within oneself when there's that dissatisfaction with what is the first signpost that a pivot is maybe a good idea, and certainly something worth consideration. And that pivot could be something that's internal, that doesn't take you away from doing what you're doing, but maybe it's a new way of doing it.
Mm.
Or maybe it's doing a new thing in the same industry. But it's a change relative to what already is. In terms of timing, I think that's so widely variable. The easiest time to pivot is when you have obligations basically only to you. When financially you don't have a mortgage, or you don't have, when you're portable and the risk is lowest in making a change. But we don't always have the luxury of pivoting at those times. And that's why pivoting involves some risk. It always does. Any change involves risk. But when the pivot is well considered, when it's a pivot that's toward purpose, I think the reward is so enormous. And there are ways of mitigating risk that you can't help but move toward that new thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Laurel, could you build upon David's insights from what you've seen helping people through their pivots, and also certainly your own?
Well, I think about pivots sometimes as an emotional need or financial need, or both. So, so sometimes, you need to make a change. It might be, for example, you're working with somebody that you don't respect, and you might need a new boss. And I work with a lot of people who suffer mentally and emotionally because of that. They might lose sleep. I mean, if you're losing sleep because you're thinking about your boss, it may be time to think about a change. So there's like emotional indicators, and then there's, financial indicators. If you're, not being able to support your family, or you lost your job, that can accelerate a pivot. And, or if you feel like you're not being compensated fairly, that can accelerate a pivot. So emotional or economical is one way to look at it.
Absolutely. Richard, what do you think about when the right time to pivot is and how to recognize that?
In my culture, we look long-term, and so short-term to me is 10 years. And honestly, it is in all aspects. So 18 years ago, I started planning my pivot, my exit, to prepare and alert in a family business meeting saying, in what will be 4 years, I will step down as the head. And when my daughter said, but we're not ready. And my brothers showed them, but we don't understand. I said it was to give them the understanding that at this time they had to begin to care, to accept responsibility, that one day I would no longer be here, whether it be my choice or another choice. So it started then, and so it continues. And so today was a big decision with my daughter and nephew to change our whole China and the whole company. But I said, we'll figure it out. And it's a kind of a major thing since we've opened a new restaurant during this difficult time, a Sicilian restaurant. And the China we bought was made in Southern Italy, but not used to our type of business. So it's I think it's a continuous growth, and one that you have to be anticipating in the future. So I look at 10 years ahead of where I am, and Dave knows me, and I've got 6 projects right now that have to be completed in the 4 years. How is that going to happen? So I'm preparing that generation to understand, and they've been involved in many of the process. It's been educational. Like Dave, I enjoy teaching young people. I like to teach them all the mistakes I made. Because at University of Denver, I had a business professor, Lou Leda. They said it's okay to make a mistake as long as you learn from it and do not commit the same one. So, we can't have a fear of failing. We have to fear of not trying to succeed.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful advice. Debbie, I would love to hear your take on when is the right time and how to recognize that. From your brief intro, I can tell that you maybe wrestled with that question in terms of, I feel it, I know it, but what's the right time and how to recognize that?
Yeah. Well, I got lucky and found some strong mentors early in my career, and I was smart enough to sort of hang on to them. And they were people that, because I think so many of us are looking down for so much of the day and focused on getting through the day. And certainly in the last few years leading up to the pandemic, more work with less resources. And so I think the content of my job, for example, at Four Seasons was changing, and it frankly wasn't suiting me as well as it used to. But you're going through the motions, and and as somebody said earlier, you've got financial or emotional connections or reasons to stay. But I think that's when people that really know you, particularly people that have known you for a long period of time, can help bail you out a little, because they're the ones that are asking you questions and forcing you to sort of look up and look down the road. And certainly mentors that helped me sort of suggest maybe it's time, or maybe it's time to be thinking about something else. And they've got your back. So it's not a self-serving exercise. It's all about you and what's best for you. So you take their advice and you listen hard to what they have to say. So I would suggest to the people that are listening in that if you've got a mentor that maybe you just need to dust that relationship off a little bit and re-energize it, and they do know you and they've known you in your professional or your personal life for a long time, they can be invaluable to help you determine when and how and what that's going to look like.
Absolutely. And something I think that's very evident from all four of your answers as kind of an undercurrent to each of them is time. Not one of you gave an answer that had something to do with immediate results. I decided on Monday and Tuesday I'm turning around to do it. All of it involves Richard's pre-planning by years, mentorship and relationships established over time, really delving into what your purpose is and what your passions are. And I think that sometimes that gets a little bit lost in the mix, that there is a lot of thought work that goes into it, and there is some preparation and lead time. Even if the pivot itself or that crisis moment itself occurs in a split moment, there's a lot that leads up to it before. So I think that was really interesting to hear that all four of your answers incorporated that. Wonderful. And speaking of undercurrents, I would love to talk to you guys about the current climate we're finding ourselves in, how it's impacting the industry's purpose as a whole, and how does that maybe change the traditional understanding of a pivot from more of an individualistic component to just as in general for hospitality. David, would you like to start us off again?
Sure, thank you. I think what we're starting to see is, and Richard is certainly, his organization is evidence of this, is a big resurgence. I'm not sure we're ready for it everywhere from a public health perspective, but it's coming. There's this massive pent-up demand that people want to travel, people want to go out to restaurants and be served, not just get takeout. And that's coming. As we roll out vaccination, we're already seeing airline traffic pick up, and not just current traffic, but bookings months out. And that's a leading indicator that hotels and restaurants are going to be busy again. That presents opportunity. There are people who've pivoted away from the industry during this time out of necessity and may not pivot back. And that creates opportunity for those who are still in or want to come back. And so I would encourage people to be thinking about sort of the glass really overflowing almost, because whereas it may not feel that way right now, I think by June, July, it's going to be torrential what's flowing out of the glass. And we need to be ready for that. We need to be ready for that in terms of what it presents to us as individuals in terms of opportunity and how we respond. And I'm excited by that. I hope that we're ready for what's out there to come. Right now, I don't feel like we're quite ready.
Absolutely. And I think something that can be said universally about COVID is it has been a sifter. It has sorted out priorities for people, what was important before, what we could live without, what we absolutely can't. And to your point, I think it's very interesting to see, in terms of the industry, us focusing on what do we really value and what do we really want to bring back in a powerful way. And just it's a little bit re-energizing in a way. So it's an interesting turn when you say the glass is overflowing. It's true.
People are dying to have experiences right now. They just want them safely. That's the only difference in the experience really that's desired. And so, it's incumbent on folks operating in the industry to think about how to provide that experience that people are so yearning for.
Yeah. Richard, I think you're a great next answer if we can follow up off of David's. How is your industry and your restaurants in particular in your community? What does that pivot look like in order to provide those in the safe environment, and what has that been?
Well, we did not open immediately when the governor gave us permission. I wanted to prepare. I wanted to make my staff, number one, feel safe. We did total disinfecting of the kitchens on a weekly basis. We had them change and go to a disposable menu with limited items. And where we do a lot of tableside service, we stopped that. We needed to have our staff feel safe, that we cared.
Yeah.
In turn, they made the customers feel safe. So people missed our tableside preparation of sangria. They'd walk up to the bar to see it. Or our 1905 salad, named one of the best salads to make a meal out of, and not done tableside. So slowly but surely we're changing, and we start preparing the salad, and the guests felt like that was a positive. They felt like there was a sense of normality. Then we did the 1905 salad. We haven't had our sugar packets and our hand painted ceramic tiles from Spain, but we're issuing those back when you want a sweetener with your coffee or your tea. It's step by step. We have flamenco show in our Tampa restaurant, and we've done that now back and bringing it back. People want a sense of normalcy, and in Florida, we have a great governor that's led us, and we feel safe. We're still practicing social distancing to the best of our ability. I have no desire to try to be at 100% occupancy, even though they say I do. If we had the staff, we still wouldn't do it. So we opened a brand new restaurant called Santo Stefano, Casa Santo Stefano, Sicilian. We opened it in November 22nd during this COVID. But what we had time was to figure out, understand. We changed the air quality system, the HVA system. We put a dedicated outside air system in the hood. That was the first in Florida. That's the equivalent of being outside. 100% of fresh air is coming back in. And people had a sense of feeling better about it. We had 90-year-old people coming to eat in there because we had the table social distancing. They had confidence that because of my responsibility to my staff, I was going to be responsible for providing safety. We've taken advantage and providing more outdoor space. So we have a restaurant that Dave knows that been very successful. We increased that outdoor dining where people feel safe. I had a meeting today. They went to sit outside. What a beautiful day to sit out in Florida. And you saw the people all enjoying life. And yet we make sure everybody wears a mask. Nobody gives us a difficult time from our customers. It's been enlightening. It's also taught us that we can be more efficient. So we have less tables. We're able to turn tables faster by looking at the items that we have on the menu. Maybe that item that only accounted for 3% of the sales, we took that off. It wasn't missed. And we're coming back with just a few items that people did miss. And the way it's prepared will reduce some of the tableside service because it takes too much time. It stresses out the server. It's been a learning experience and one that we will benefit from.
Yeah. I would say it's almost, in some ways, it sounds like it's reinvigorated your purpose and really a commitment to your customers, a commitment to your staff, and just the joy of service is all over your enthusiasm and your voice.
You know, we didn't do takeout because we were too busy. And so now we've done a great job. It's amazing. It was accounting now for about 11% of the sales in our principal restaurant. And we have the cameras out there so that people don't have to come out of their cars. And I see them coming in, and we bring them out and say, gosh, that was fast. So I had somebody that was leaving for Tampa to go to our St. Augustine restaurant. They ordered food to pick up tomorrow. They said, y'all make it so easy. And so it's for me that we've learned so much. We've learned about this new opportunity to sell food to go.
Wonderful to see the innovation come out of it. I love it.
I do too.
Debbie, would you be able to share what you are seeing and feeling from this current climate and how it's impacting the hospitalities industry's purpose?
Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit of an Eeyore here because I am seeing an awful lot of top talent leaving the industry. I think they feel betrayed by us. Unlike the way Richard has treated his staff, I think some companies, for whatever reason, have struggled with how they've faced this crisis. And I think as a result, a lot of talented people lost their jobs, obviously, and left the industry. So how do we get them back? I think is going to be, because I agree with David, I think that there is pent up demand. And I think that we as an industry have to figure out how to invite them back and to make a compelling argument to bring them back. I also see an awful lot of hotels, and I'm more involved in hotels and restaurants, that are, I would use the analogy of driving a car, a stick shift car in second gear, and they don't know how to get out of second gear. They're going to ruin their engine if they don't, is the analogy I would use. It isn't sustainable, and they're tentative. And we don't blame them, right? Because we've reset this COVID thing countless times. But I think that the people that have stayed with them, whether it be in a restaurant or a hotel, are some of their best people, and they are being asked to do too much. And so I think they are feeling, whether they're being compromised on safety or they're just working very long hours. So I think the industry also has to sort of realize, okay, a day is going to come when whatever this new normal is, they're going to have to staff accordingly. They're going to have to put capital money in, have to get on with their business. And I think there's the creative people like the Richards of the world that are, making lemonade out of lemons. I worry about some of the companies that are just stuck in that second gear, and I hope they get out of it, because we need them, and we need to get them re-engaged, and so that's what I would sort of see is sort of some of the subcurrents that are concerning me right now.
And I think that's so interesting for you to share, and it's not Eeyore at all. It's very much a realistic industry truth that is worth addressing. I do think it is so impactful because it does in some ways boil down to who your leaders are. And if your leader is a type who's adaptive and who takes on the challenge and the change as a fun, let's go whitewater rafting, let's ride these rapids. But there are other leaders who are taking that on, maybe hoping that the ride ends sooner than later, that they won't actually have to go through the rapids. So I think it's not Eeyore, it's just a very realistic thing to address.
I do want to add one thing. I do think that one of the positive outcomes is that we may end up with fewer but better or more meaningful jobs.
Yes.
Because I think labor is going to be revised, and the way we staff our restaurants and hotels. And so if we end up with fewer jobs, that's not great. But if they're more meaningful, if they're better compensated, I think that's good for our industry.
Absolutely. And it leaves room for new jobs to be created in a meaningful way if those current ones are optimized at the right number. Wonderful. Laurel, would you like to share your insights?
Well, I appreciate the panel and all I've learned here. And a couple of things. I think, because I'm working with all sectors, there are a lot of people that hate their jobs in other sectors that would love to be in our business. So I think that's going to bode well for us in the hospitality industry, that we will have more diverse talent. The other thing that gives me a lot of hope is young people, and including the students I get to meet at Fritz. And the reality that the barrier to entry for the hospitality industry, as technology is accessible and as knowledge is accessible, is very low. I interviewed a group last week. They're not in hospitality, but it's a company with 60 employees. And it was a company built over the last 5 years. And there are two brothers that started the company out of college, and they employ 60 people. 59 of them are under the age of 30. So I would like to go back to Debbie's great suggestion of dusting off your mentors. I think we all need if you're over 40, you need a mentor in their 20s, because they can teach us a lot. And they could probably teach us about more equity in our industry, more fun in our industry, and bring a lot of energy to an industry that might be a little behind and needs to get with the times.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I do think it's important that both you and Debbie are working cross industry at this point. Certainly you, but also Debbie in your consulting role as well. It spans quite a range. And so I do think it's interesting to not see just what's in hospitality, but also draw some parallels. Wonderful. Well, in the interest of time, I would like to give you each an opportunity to kind of share about yourselves, either personally or professionally, and then we'll jump into QA. The thing I'm hoping each of you can share is, what did you learn about yourself in 2020? And that can either be a challenging or a satisfying learning experience. And what are you looking forward to in the future, personally or professionally? Laurel, why don't we start with you?
I learned that I think when I was younger, my dream was to be on Oprah, and now I get to be Oprah. So I guess you're never too old to learn something new. And I'm having a blast doing that. So, and I just look forward to learning from young people, really, with David and, just my niece is my political mentor. I learned something about the world every day with her. Just looking forward to spending more time with younger people.
That's wonderful. And Richard, how about you?
What have I learned? That I have this beautiful young lady here, my daughter, who lives next door to me, who came to talk to me, that she gives me that confidence I learned from her, and I try to teach her. That today, like I said, I have all the confidence that I've done everything I can. I learned from high school students I mentor and college students, and those that have graduated that come to seek advice. But I can learn so much from them. And when I ask, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? To understand what they want to eat, we have to adjust. In my 116 years, that's why restaurants don't make it. We had to change all through the different cycles, because during the 40s it was a luxury to use canned vegetables. And when I left the University of Denver, I found out that wasn't a good idea. So we had to evolve. And so we continue evolving and learning. And we have to learn from others. And the younger people can help us understand, and we can help them to be successful. I learned from those that are successful around the world. And we also learn from the failures to see that people that made mistakes so that we don't commit them. It's been an experience and a joy to do this with my daughter. And we are fine, and we will be fine. And even though sales may be down a little bit, we're operating more efficiently. And Dave, I learned a lot about our labor cost, and we were down 2% this week in labor, with sales that rivaled 2 years ago. So we're becoming more efficient. We're becoming really a leader within the Tampa Bay community that other restaurateurs look to learn and how we survived.
That's wonderful. That is a bright future to look forward to. Thank you for sharing that, Richard. Debbie, was there anything that you learned either challenging or satisfying in 2020 about yourself? And what can you tell us that you're most looking forward to?
Well, I think I'm like a lot of people on this call today. I mean, I had to take a long look at myself in the mirror, because it hit and work stopped altogether and there was no external distraction. So I had to really take greater ownership of sort of my own thoughts and behaviors. It really was clear to me that work is what you do, not who you are, because I understood that conceptually, but in real time, I had never really faced a day without work. So I think that's what I learned. And I think a lot of us have had to kind of get to know ourselves a whole lot better, for better or worse. I think what I'm really looking forward to is an appreciation for time with family and friends. I think we're all feeling the same way, that I don't think for the rest of my life I will ever take a friendship for granted, a dinner out. I think this was so profoundly impactful to me and to so many people, that I think I'm hoping that a lot of us, it'll end up being a gift, because we will live our lives, the rest of our lives, in a much more full and rich way as a result of the last year and a half. That's what I'm hoping for.
That's a wonderful hope, and I think you will get your wish, certainly.
Hopefully, yeah.
I have seen a lot of appreciation for the service industry and for hotel stays and for dining out, for just the smallest things that you never thought you would be excited for, are now you realize how much you appreciate them.
Yeah.
David, what can you share from your 2020 and what you're looking forward to?
Experiences that are related to all of what's been shared. The gift for us, my wife and me, this year was this really intense family time with our now 18-year-old son, who's getting ready to launch, and we'll have an empty nest. And we've had this very intense time together to really sort of see him fully and experience him more fully before he leaves the house. I think the thing that I've learned, it was more a reinforcement, and it's not a strong suit for me, so I need constant reinforcement in this, is patience. And patience in the form of trying to exert control over things I actually have control over, and leave the things I don't aside, and not to get upset about things that are outside of my control. That's a lesson that I first learned when we moved to a developing country for a year. The water's on, the water's off. Electricity, no electricity. You adapt. And this year has done this, reinforced this for me. And I think leading through this time, leading a team through this time, has required that kind of patience to enable people to be as good as they can be, and feel comfortable and safe and purposeful.
Absolutely. I would actually like to transition that. We have a Q&A question that I think will be perfect for you, David. You and Richard both mentioned leaving very connected teams. And Richard mentioned alerting his family. Can you talk more specifically about what steps and conversations do you have to leave, that those aren't maybe emotionally ready for you to go, or along those lines?
I think that the best we can do for others is to live fully, recognizing that we do have obligations to other people. In order to be fully engaged in those relationships, in order to be fully present and to really maximize the value in those relationships, we have to make sure that we're whole. And for me to be in a bad place is not going to make my relationship with my spouse or somebody I care about a healthy relationship. I wouldn't be honest, and I need to be honest with me in order to be honest with someone else. And so, while somebody else may not have been ready for me to pivot when I left my own restaurant, I had an obligation, a greater obligation to me, and to pursue what I saw as my path, then I had to staying on a path that was no longer satisfying in order to make everything in life work.
And I do think, as hard as those conversations are, what's coming through from your answer right now is a genuine character. It's a true concern. They are genuine feelings. And I think when you present those as they are with the truth behind them, that makes the difficult conversations that much easier for those that may not be emotionally ready for the same change that you're about to embark on.
And I know because Richard and I have had multiple conversations around his succession planning in his organization and transitioning to his daughter and nephew. I know that he's been honest with them, and the things that I just said Richard's really a transparent guy. You know where you are with Richard, you know what he's thinking, and that's so critical.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I really appreciate, I want to say thank you again so much for everyone for their time and joining us today, both attendees and panelists. I know that this has been a trying year, but I am hopeful from what I'm hearing, and I am hopeful from the responses of what you all are seeing as industry experts as well. If there's anything you would like to say to our attendees before we wrap up, I would love to hear it.
Yes. You know, my very first class at University of Denver, the summer of 1971, I took Introduction to Hospitality. Dr. Douglas Keister was the head of the school. And the thing that I repeat to my daughters and everyone in the family, he said, never count how many hours a week you work. If you do, you're in the wrong industry. Because this industry we're in, there are no hours. We're working when other people are playing. We're working day and night. And so what we do is not work, it's something we love, and you must love what you do. And if we can get that, make that infection to the staff, it's what makes us successful. Why we have such longevity of our employees, with 23% of the 1,400 people with us 10 years or more. That includes 6 restaurants that are open at less than 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think that right there, Richard, speaks to Laurel's mission about helping people find their purpose.
If they're not happy, I'm happy to help them find their life and what they want to do. You've got to find that which makes you happy and satisfied. And so that's my mission, is to help people realize the dream.
Wonderful. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Hannah, you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you each for joining.
I'm going to stop recording.